So Peter had a question about dependency injection. So that's what's happening when we're injecting. Here, dependency injection is also happening here. We're going to use it later in the semester when we do unit testing. So what the heck is dependency injection? This is probably, let's see, there's some different diagrams here. This is not a bad picture of it. Actually, this one will be okay. So the idea of dependency injection means when an object gets created, that object might need another object in order to run. But what object comes in can be dynamic. So it may be, so for example, if you're out in the backyard, if my kid's out in the backyard tomorrow, if I hand her a shovel and say work, right? What is that indicator? The fact that I've given her a shovel means I'm telling her to do what? Dig, most likely. If the next day she comes back and we go out in the yard and I hand her a rake and I say work, what's she gonna do? Right. So that would be a real world example of dependency injection, right? So I'm providing her something along with the instruction. And even though it's the same instruction, work, whatever it is that I give her, that determines what the action should be, what she should do. So that's what's happening here. So at runtime, whenever our database class is being instantiated, we are handing it our user class, our role class, and an identifier data type for the primary key. So Peter's question is, what does inject mean? Here we have dependency injection in the front end, in the UI. So in order for this file to be able to determine if the user signed in, and also to be able to display the username, when this is loaded, this application user object is getting handed to the view. Now, sometimes this might be empty. If we're anonymous, there is no object being passed in. And that's why when we evaluate this, well, it's null, it's empty, so we get register and login links when we're anonymous. So we're going to use dependency injection later on in the course as well. We're going to do something like this. So right now, for example, our controllers are set up this way. When you instantiate a controller, it automatically connects to our database. This is the way our controllers work right now. So here's our categories controller. So you notice right away, as soon as the controller is instantiated, it makes a reference to our database connection. This works fine when our application is, and actually here's our constructor. So you notice when we instantiate, we call the constructor, our constructor takes in our database class so we can connect to the database and do CRUD. The problem is when we want to do unit testing later on, we don't want our controllers to talk to the database because that's not a unit test, that's an integration test when we're testing our app and our database together. So we want to be able to unit test the methods in our controllers without talking to the database. We want to just kind of use some mock data instead. Sorry, this is what we want to do. We don't want it to connect to our context. We want to just mock up the data. So the challenge is, right now our controllers are hard-coded when we scaffolded them, that whenever you call the controller, it automatically gets our database object. So our database is tightly bound in to our controller. What we ultimately want to do is refactor our controllers so they work like this. When we instantiate the controller, if we pass in a database object, then our application is at runtime and we want to talk to the database and do CRUD. But if we instantiate our controller and we don't pass it a database class, that means we're doing unit testing. So we don't want to talk to our database, we want to work with mock data instead. So depending on what we give to the controller, it might talk to the database or it may not. And that'll happen at runtime when you instantiate the controller. So we'll use dependency injection for that. Okay, so we'll do it more. I hope that gives you some idea. Okay. Dependency injection is also really used very often in Node applications. That things are passed at runtime as needed. And depending on what we pass to an object, that object will behave differently depending on what it gets. So that's what's happening here at the controller level, and that's what's happening here at the view level. So my Google login is mostly working. There is one thing we need to change with it. But I want to show you guys a couple of other quick things on here first before we go back to the code, because I'd rather discuss this stuff before the end of the class. I did put a couple of things up here that we should look at quickly. Now, when we set our project up, we enabled HTTPS. This is now critical. It's an absolute must for every web application, even if it's a static site where all you're doing is HTML and CSS. Does anybody know why? There's a couple of reasons why you need SSL for every website. Two reasons.
That we need SSL for every website?
Yes, even if you were just going to do a static website that was just HTML and CSS. There's no database, there's no credentials, there's nothing. It's just a read-only site.
I think it has something to do with packet injection. Put malicious code inside the packet. SSLs for encrypting that.
That's true.
I mean, technically you don't need to, but it's pretty much every website now is SSL.
Well, you need to for two reasons. Well, actually, one company and two reasons. Google is the company. Google has made SSL necessary. Here's the first reason. But it actually explains both in this link. So this link's a couple years old, or maybe about a year and a half old. When is this from? Okay, it's a year ago. So first of all, Google decided sometime last year that SSL was going to affect your search engine rankings. That it was going to rank sites that did not have SSL lower than sites that do. So if you want your site to be found by Google, Google wants it to have SSL. The second thing Google did is they started doing this. Any website in Google, in Chrome anyway, if it does not have SSL, if it has SSL, Chrome will mark it this way. It'll mark it in green as secure. If you don't have an SSL certificate, it'll mark your site in red and it will say not secure. Doesn't mean it's dangerous. If it's just HTML and CSS, there's no risk, but people will see that in their browser. They'll see not secure. They'll think your site is going to download a Trojan or a virus onto their machine and they will leave. So for this reason, you need SSL now in all circumstances. Fortunately, many hosts now offer this. Many hosts offer a free service called Let's Encrypt. So it's a free 90-day SSL certificate. Not all hosts offer this. For example, if you host on GoDaddy, they want you to buy their $70 certificate, so they don't offer this. But many hosts do. So this is a quick, free, easy way. You just enable it in your hosting control panel, bang, your site has SSL. If you don't have this or this isn't an option, probably the most affordable place to get SSL is here. So buy a certificate. You can buy them from the hosting companies. They'll typically charge you somewhere between $50 and $100 a year for a certificate. It's more work, but less expensive to buy them here. So at Namecheap, we can look at the pricing. And there's a bit of a setup process involved. So it's easier to say to the hosting company, sure, here's $50, here's the domain name, register and install the certificate. That's the easy way. However, you can buy them for $10.48 US, so it's quite a bit cheaper. So in this process, there's some back and forth between the certificate issuer and the hosting company. So you buy the certificate, but before the certificate can be installed, you have to ask the hosting company to generate a certificate request on the web server. Looks something like this. So I do a lot of hosting with these guys. They'll sell me SSL certificates, but they want 75 bucks US for a certificate. So I'm going to buy an $11 certificate at Namecheap. So I go here, I buy the certificate. When you buy it, you have to register it to a particular domain. You can't transfer it from one domain to another. So you put in the domain, and then you go to the hosting company, and you say to them something like, I'll just go find a closed ticket. Okay. So I make a certificate request. So you give them information about the domain owner, and they will send you a certificate request. So you have to take this, copy it, and then I go back here after I've spent my $11, and I have to enter that code and attach it to my certificate. Once that's done, the certificate issuer will send you an email, probably a minute later, and say, here's a link, you can download your certificate. So you download those files to your machine. It looks something like this. Typically, you get a bunch of files that look something like this. In this case, I get 2 files. So there's the actual certificate. Looks like this. So then I have to upload this file to the web server and say to the host, hey, the certificate's on the server, can you please install it? So HTTPS will be enabled. So I do the legwork, but that way I buy a certificate for $11 rather than spending 75. Or I could just say to the host, hey, I want a certificate, charge me the 75. You guys do all this and install it. You can do either one. I will typically go with the cheap ones. And now this host now supports Let's Encrypt, which is even easier. I can just go into any domain. Like I can go into a domain here, and I can just turn on Let's Encrypt. I get a free certificate, which is automatically renewed every 90 days. So yeah, I'll just enable it. Good for 90 days. Done. It should be ready in a couple minutes, which is cool. Nothing. So we don't want our sites being marked as not secure in Chrome, and we don't want Google hurting our search performance. So we should always have SSL for everything. Fortunately, when we use things like the shared services we're using, like on Heroku and Azure, we've got HTTPS anyway. They've already bought the certificate, so all our stuff is running with HTTPS. Yeah. So we should be doing that. The other thing I want to point out, I'll just take a couple minutes here, is this. The OWASP top 10. So a former student, grad from the program, who now has his own IT consulting business, said, you really should show this to students when you do the lesson on web application security. Anybody heard of this before or know what it is? We'll just take a quick peek at this. This is a great reference and something all web developers should be looking at. So this is a not-for-profit group. Every few years, it's a group of security experts, and they publish a list of the 10 most critical web application security flaws. They update this list every few years. And they've now got a mobile version of this. So they put out a description of most common vulnerabilities and how you deal with them. Fortunately, when we're in the .NET world, ASP.NET Identity deals with a lot of this stuff. So things like cross-site scripting, so it describes each, it's how hackers would attack you, what they would do, for example, and how you would deal with it. So using identity, it's designed to deal with a lot of this stuff. But this is a good reference here, kind of like a checklist. And there are more and more jobs out there for people working in the web application security world. So that's here for you guys as a resource to refer to in this folder, right? Also a common interview question for a web application developer, especially if you're working in a really sensitive area like finance or government. They might ask you what this is. So it's a good thing to be aware of and know what it is. Okay, so that link is there. Enough with that. I just wanted to touch on those things quickly. Okay, so my Google Auth works, but I do want to fix something with it. I kind of hacked this together last week because I've hard-coded my Google credentials into my startup file, which is terrible practice. So I'm going to go back to, so this link, which is in week 6, the link that goes to the social auth in .NET Core, the link was down here at the bottom. So I'm going to go back here and go to Google because it gives me instructions how to use the package manager console to generate these as secrets instead. I tried running this. For some reason, it didn't work. It didn't save, but I'm going to try it again. So I think what I did was I copied these to a text file, and then I replaced these values with the actual values from my Google API console. So my text file was open here from last week. So it wants me to use the .NET user secret vault. So I'm going to try running these again. So I'm going to try to save this, run these commands one at a time. So command is .NET user secret set my authentication for my Google client ID with the value I generated in the Google Developer Console. And then I also have to specify that it's for the Low Ballers project, because I might have a different Google ID secret for a different project. Okay, so it says it successfully saved that. And then I'm going to run my client secret command same way.
If you were to do that again with a different secret, it would just overwrite it.
It should, yes. So I'm going to put that code back in my startup file. I'm going to take out the hard-coded values and again try and read them. Using my client ID. So I'm going to build, and I'll try in Chrome to log in. Not exactly sure why my server died, but I'll have to restart it. So I'm going to try my Google login now. Okay. So it seemed to work this week. I don't know why. I must have just messed up some part of that process last week. So to get those commands, they're in this link. So I have a link in week 6 to social auth in .NET Core. It takes you here to the authentication social tutorial. So it takes you right here, and in here I just went to the authentication down to this section. Sorry, I think the link takes you here. The link I posted takes you here. And then I clicked Google. So I got the code to generate the secrets in this section, and I got my client ID and secret in the Google Developer Console. So if you need those values, you can get them. console.developers.google.com. There's a link in the Microsoft tutorial here. So we created a low ballers project last week, and under credentials, here's my client ID. And if I want to edit it, there's my client secret. So those are the two values that I need to go into those two commands to run in the console. And once you generate those secrets, well, you just copy and paste this section literally right from the tutorial into your startup file. I didn't change anything here. That's verbatim what's here. So now my Google login is working and my credentials are now being pulled from the key store. Now there's one thing to note. The key store only works locally. If I push this up to Azure, it doesn't have those keys. So there's some description here on what else you would need to do. The other thing we did, remember last week, is we had to set up a redirect URI. So after a user signs in with Google, where do they come? They come back to our domain / signin-google. So again, this will work locally. But if I were to publish this, that I'm not going to be able to use a Google login because it's going to try to redirect to localhost. So in this case, we would have to do a few things. The first one is in my Google console. I've already got my localhost / sign-in-google as an authorized URI. I would also need any live URL. So something like this, like sign1 Azure.net. Oh, it wants me to add AzureWebsites.net to a list of authorized domains. So then my Google login could go either to localhost or to my live site.
So the secret would still be uploaded to the Azure server.
We'll get to that. So actually it will say, no, I've got to go to my authorized domains first. So that would be in here. So an authorized domain would be AzureWebsites.net. Single label. What is a top private domain? Okay, well, we'll figure this out with Azure before we do assignment 2. Well, their top private domain is google.com. I don't know why azurewebsites.net wouldn't be.
Your website's done. I don't know. Get something in.
All right. Well, I'll leave it for today. We'll come back to it before we do assignment 2. So we'll also look at the credential piece. Yeah, so what we would need to do, here's how we would do it in Azure. There's a configuration spot in Azure where we would set up these 2 keys and the values. That's actually where we normally put our database connection string as well. So in your Azure site, there's a configuration node. You click on that and you can create the key and value and save it.
You just put it in there and
Yeah.
update it for
You put it in the Azure panel and it will read them from the Azure
Can you do the
configuration.
same thing to keep your connection string?
Yes, it's actually recommended. We'll do that. I'll have to recreate my site on Azure because I've deleted it all. We'll do that after reading week. Okay. So the last thing we'll do, we're going to try and do this in 10 minutes and then I will let you go early. All right. There's Google. The Facebook process is almost identical. So let's add Facebook login. So if you go through this link and click Facebook, there's a link here, navigate to the Facebook developers app. So it's just developers.facebook.com/apps. There should be an option here. So if I mouse over my apps, you just have to sign in with a Facebook account. You shouldn't have to register. I'm signed in already. Once you're in here, you just click Create App. So I'll call it Low Ballers, right? So this will be the title that pops up on the Facebook login window. It'll say, Low Ballers wants to access your Facebook profile.
Is this like an API or something?
It's an API, but Identity already has a library to call it. We're basically just enabling it. So I'll create the app, which interestingly enough uses CAPTCHA, which is Google.
Will we have a chance to integrate that as well? CAPTCHA, if we wanted to, or is that?
I wasn't going to, but if we have time, we could. So now under Facebook, so here I want to set up Facebook login. Now notice with Facebook, it says in development. This means it will work on localhost, and if I publish it, my account can use it to log in, but Brady couldn't log in to mine if it's in development mode. Only the owner could do it, unless it's running on localhost. So again, with your assignment, in order for me to use my Facebook login on your assignment, you'll need to publish. So we'll pick web as the platform. Actually, we don't even need this. All we really need, so I'll just click on settings here. This is like a wizard to do front end Facebook login. We're doing back end, so I'm not even going to fill that part out. I'm just going to go to settings. We do need to set up the redirect URI. So same thing, after someone logs in with Facebook, where does Facebook send them? So in here, I'm just going to grab copy the URL to our homepage. So I'll just copy the link. And in my valid redirect URIs, I put in my domain /sign-in-Facebook. When I publish this to Azure, again, we'll do this after reading week, I'll make sure to include my proper live domain /sign-in Facebook as well. So just put that in here, save the changes. So we've set this up. If I go to settings up here on the left and basic, it's going to give us the API keys. So Google calls them client ID and client secret. Facebook calls them app ID and app secret. So we're going to need to create 2 new Facebook keys in our credential store and link to them. So again, if I go back to so we've done this, we've created an app, we set up Facebook login, we've added the redirect URI. I'm basically just following the steps in the tutorial, so you've got this for reference. Yeah, it's the same. If I change it to 2.2, it doesn't update. It's the same. So now it wants us to store the app ID and secret. So again, I'll copy these commands. And I'll just go to my credentials file here. I'll paste them in, and then I'll replace the app ID and app secret with the values from the Facebook console. I'll go back to Facebook. Here's my app ID. And again, after it, I'll add @ project $. And I'll do the same for my other command. And then Facebook doesn't show you the secret. You've got to click on show. It wants you to put in your password. And then it shows you the secret. And these values should be enclosed in double quotes. They're strings. So now I'll just run these 2 commands to store these credentials in my vault, and then we'll be able to copy and paste the code enabling Facebook into our app, and it should run. So I'll copy the first command, go back to Package Manager Console. So we're going to store the app ID. And I want to store the app secret.
And then the terminal.
That's odd. It said it doesn't like -. Oh, I have a space here for the word project.
That's the package manager console that you use?
Yep.
Okay.
I do. So I will take it out. Okay, so it says it's saved my app ID and app secret. And now if I go back to the tutorial, I will just, I don't need the first part of this because we already have services.authentication. I'll just add the .add Facebook. I'll just copy that. So we've got .add Google, and before my closing semicolon, we'll add Facebook. So we can add both providers. Google uses client ID and secret from the vault. Facebook uses app ID and secret. That should be all. I should be able to log in with Facebook now. We will try it. So I'm logged in as admin. I'll actually log out of Facebook, so it should prompt me to log into my Facebook account. So now when I go to log in, I get Facebook enabled here. Brings me to the login screen. Right, so the app title, so you're asking, it shows up here. So now I'll continue. It might be.
Or is it his burner?
Yeah. It's my account for this guy. You guys are too young to know who this is.
Only Herb I know is the guy who's really good at skeet shooting.
This was, I highly recommend checking out the TV show from the 80s, WKRP in Cincinnati. So that's Herb. So this is my burner account. Herb's a pretty sharp-dressed guy. So now it says, okay, you've authenticated. You want to go ahead and register. And now I'm logged in as Herb. Now I do want to show you one last thing, and then I will set you free. This is the account I created this API with, so I can log into it. But keep in mind, what happens if I try and use a different Facebook account to log in? I am a regular user. So if I try and use a different Facebook account, oh, whoops, I guess I need to sign out of Facebook.
Is there a way to,
Hang on, just give me 1 sec.
before I start asking?
Yeah, I just want to show you what happens because we're in development mode. I don't care about this, just take me to my apps. And adding any other Facebook services, you would just enable the other APIs. We enabled login, you can enable anything else. So if I go to my Low Ballers project, notice it says it's in development. So I can log in with the account I used to create the app, which is Herb, right? So it's in development. I'll just do it in another browser, I guess that's easier. So I'll log out with my Google login. If I log in with Facebook, I better sign out my Facebook account. I created that burner account, and then all kinds of people started sending me friend requests. Okay, so I'm signed out of Facebook. So now I want to go and log into my app with a different Facebook account, not the one I used to create the API. Right. Probably lots. So this is what you get when your app is in development and any other Facebook account tries to log into it other than you as the owner. You get this. So it says the app is in development mode and you don't have access. You've got to use a registered account. So there's 2 ways around this. One is put the app in production in the Facebook panel, but that means anybody can log in. The other option here is if I go to roles and test users, I could add, for example, my other Facebook account as a test user. Then both of my accounts would have access, but nobody else would. So if I added, or here it just actually it generates a test account I can use. So in your assignment, because part of one of the things you're going to have to do is enable Google and Facebook authentication for assignment 2, you'll have to either add me as a tester or you'll have to put it into production, because otherwise you can log in with Facebook, but I can't. So if I toggle this into production, it may ask me, oh, here, yeah, you could add developers or testers here. That's one way of doing it. But it says you've got to create a URL to your privacy policy. So I would have to write at least a fake privacy policy in order to be able to turn it to production. So it's functional now, but right now I'm the only one who can use it. So we will look at all of these things you need to do to make the authentication in Google and Facebook live when you publish to Azure. We'll do all that after reading week. So yeah, you need a privacy policy URL. So if so it won't log me in here. I'll just get this forever. I think if I take this link and set that as my privacy policy, I think I can then.
I probably want to read
It's not compliant. So I would need to publish this to Azure and then put in the live site, and then I can turn it into.
I wonder if it has to be on your own domain, or if you can just write code.
I'm sure I could do anything. So if I do, let's try this.
All right.
Okay, so it took that. I could put an icon here, right? So if I want my low ballers icon to appear on the little pop-up screen. Okay.
Oh, well.
So I think now I can turn it into production. So you have to pick a category. Well, it's education, we'll say. So once I put it in production, I could then log in with my other Facebook account. So it's live. So now I can go back here and I should be able to log in with a different Facebook account. So now I'm logging in with my Rich account rather than Herb because it's in production. So you'll need to do this with your Facebook login. Otherwise, you can log into it, but I can't. All right. You guys have had a long week. I know you had an exam, you had an assignment due, so we will wrap it up here. I'll push everything to Git and stop the stream.
What's Vlad doing on the stream?
Is that how you spell Vlad? Is that how you spell Vlad here? Starts with map E.
Did you just?
No?
Wait, is Vladimir actually like